Okay, well, good morning, ninth grade. I hope you're all doing well. I hope the test wasn't too bad for you. Once you finish that, go ahead and start on this homework. We're going to skip a chapter because I think we want to get to something that's a little more important that's going to be helpful here in our last week. Can you believe we are down to our last week of math? So we're on page 484. So you got to jump ahead. We're on 12.1, which is about solving equations. But this time we're going to be solving some harder equations, probably ones that you have never seen before. So we are on page 484. What we're going to start with here is this that's called the zero product property. Okay, and the zero product property basically means that if you have something, let's say they use the example here, p times q, if that equals 0, then this is what's true. Then p equals 0 and q equals 0. Okay, so does that make sense? If I was solving, so think about this, if I was solving for p, what would I do? I'd divide by q, and what would they give me? P would equal 0. Right, if we do the same thing again, this time I divided by p, and divided by p here, what's going to happen? Q is going to equal 0. So it's just showing us that whenever something's equal to 0, we divide or subtract or add to see what our answer would have been. Okay, so look with me on their example here, example 1, right? So let's say that they give us, let's say that they give us x minus 5 times x minus 2, sorry, x plus 2, and they say that equals 0, right? It's now it's an equation because it equals 0. All I do is for one moment, I choose one of them. So one of the x's, and I rewrite this over here, x minus 5 equals 0. Then I choose the other one and rewrite it down here as x plus 2 equals 0. Now to get the answer to this, because there's two x's, I'm going to have two answers, right? How do I solve for this x? Well, I just add 5, and I get x equals 5. Okay, that one was easy. Then over here, I just subtract 2 and subtract 2, I get x equals negative 2. Again, very easy, and this is my answer. It's both of those, because when you have something x squared, you get two answers. So one answer is 5, and one answer is negative 2. Okay, so not very hard to figure out. And then look, if I put this 5 in for there, you see what happened? 5 minus 5 equals 0. And then this is going to be 0 times whatever this is. It doesn't matter whatever that is. 0 times it is going to give me my 0. Then if I took this guy, this negative 2, and plugged him in here, what would happen? Negative 2 plus 2 equals 0. So whenever this 0 is multiplied by whatever's here, it's going to generate a 0. So I know that both, my answer here is 5 comma negative 2. Okay, x equals 5 comma negative 2. Okay, so it's just building on the principles that we already learned. Now I want you to look at example 2. Okay, this is where it gets a little harder, is they give us a trinomial, x squared plus 8x plus 12 equals 0. So now we do the same exact thing. For a second, we just totally don't even look at this part. Okay, all we need to do first is look at this guy. We're going to do exactly what we did in the last lesson and factor, right? So I go in here, I know I'm going to have x and x. Now you know what times what is 12. That will add it up, give me 8, right? They're both pluses because of that plus sign and that plus sign. So what times what is 12 and gives me 8 when added together? Well, that's 6 and 2. So now once I have that part, then I bring down my equals 0, and then I solve, just like I did the last one, where I take 1 and say, okay, x plus 2 equals 0. How do I solve for that? I do minus 2, and I get x equals negative 2. Okay, so there's 1. Then I do the same thing with this guy right here. I do x plus 6 equals 0. I subtract 6, and I get x equals negative 6. There's my answer. So I got two answers, both of them right, negative 2 and negative 6. Okay, then if you look at the book there, it says to check. How do they check? They put in this negative 2 up here for the negative 2. They put in the negative 6 for this one, and guess what? It works out, and we know that we did it correctly, right? When you have negative 2 plus 2, you get 0. So that 0 that makes that one work. Negative 6 plus 6, again, 0. So check, check. Know that it works. Not too bad. Okay, now let's go on. This one's probably a harder one. Example 3. Okay, so look at the top of the page. We have 8x squared minus 16x equals 0. Now again, the same rules still apply. So I need to say, what can I take out of these that are in there? Well, they each have an 8, right? So I can take out an 8 and each have an x. So I can take out 8x and I'm left with x minus 2. Okay, so again, I always factor first. Now, let's look at this one first. This one's easier to look at, right? I can just do what I did before. X minus 2 equals 0. I add 2, and I get x equals 2. So I know there's one answer, is x equals 2. Now for the other answer, I have this guy. So I just set him up equal to 0. I do 8x equals 0. Okay, same thing. It's not a 6, it's a 0. I divide by 8, and what do I get? X equals 0. Right? 0 divided by 8 is 0. So those are my two answers down here. These two guys right here in between this green mark. And I can check that, right? I put in this 2 up here, and I get 2 minus 2. Oh, yep, that's 0, so I did it right. I put in this 0 down here. 8 times 0 is 0, so I know I did it right. Check and check. Okay? Now, let's go on to a harder one here. Example 4. Okay, so I hope this is making sense. It's basically using all the stuff that we've learned recently. So we have 2x squared plus 8x minus 42 equals 0. So what do they all have in common? Well, they're all even numbers. So I divide by 2. And I'm left with x squared plus 4x minus 21 equals 0. Now I do this guy. I get 2, and then I get x times, and I'm going to have, let's see, the overall is negative right here. So I know that 1 is positive and 1 is negative. And then I know that the positive one is bigger because the positive is what's left. So I need the bigger one right here. So what times what is 21? 7 and 3. And look at this, that gives me 4 when they're subtracted. So 7 and minus 3 equals 0. Now all I do is do exactly what I did before, right? I set up that one equal to 0, x minus 3 equals 0, which then leads to adding 3, which is x equals 3. So there's 1. Then I do the same thing with this guy. X plus 7 equals 0. I subtract 7, I get x equals negative 7. And there's my answer there, x equals negative 7. So my two answers down here in between this green again are x equals 3, x equals negative 7. I just checked that by putting this guy right there and this guy right there, and yep, they equal 0. So I know that I did it correctly. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's do example 5. So I'm doing all the examples in the book because you can follow along. So this one, you can solve this one two ways. I'll show you the easy way, which is not the way the book did it. Okay, whenever you have just an x squared like this, what I would do is just solve for x. So I divide by 3, and I would get x squared equals 147 divided by 3, and the calculator is 49. And then I would just take the square root of both sides and get x equals plus or minus 7. Right? So that's how I would solve that one. That's very straightforward. You got to remember though that it has the plus or minus. Okay, it can be either positive or negative 7. But here's the way that they show you to do it. So same example, 3x squared. What they do is they move the 147 and set it equal to 0. Then they factor the 3 out of it and get 3. Get x squared minus 49 equals 0, right? Then they say, oh, this is a difference of squares, right? We can take the square root of both, and we get 3 times x minus 7, x plus 7 equals 0. And then you can see, you use each one of these, and you get x minus 7 equals 0. You add 7, you get x equals 7. So there's our 7. And then they take the same thing down here with x plus 7 equals 0. You subtract 7, and you get x equals negative 7, right? Just like we got in our other way that I showed you to do it, answer still x minus 7 and positive 7, okay? So you can do that either way. Not too bad. And then let's flip over to the next page here. This is our last example one that we'll do where we won't worry about example 7, but example 6, right? They have 4x cubed equals 14x squared plus 8x. Okay, now the key part is that all these have to get on the same side. Okay, so I'm going to move this guy over here and this guy over here just by subtracting. So the 4x cubed is going to stay the same, and then I'm going to have minus 14x squared minus 8x equals 0. Okay, I just moved them over and did that by subtracting 8x, canceling out. Subtracting 14x squared, canceling out. Okay, and they just came to this side as negatives. Now, I say, what do they all have in common? Well, they all have an x in common, so I can take out an x. They also all have a 2 in common, so I can take out a 2x. So I'm now left with 2x squared minus 7x minus 4 equals 0, like that. Now I just factor this guy, right? I say what times what. Okay, so let's do it this way. A times c here. A is 2, is negative 8. My b here is negative 7. So I need to say what times what is negative 8. That is also going to give me a negative 7. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. What times what is going to give me that. And I get that this right here is, I say, okay, let's see, negative 8 could be, what times what is 8? That would give me negative 7. Well, I have 8 and 1, right? But that's actually not what I need to do here because I have this 2. So I'm going to factor it out, and I'm going to get down here, the 2x is going to stay, 2x. And I'm going to get over here 2x on one side, and then so down here I have, right, so I'm looking over here, what can, sorry, not to erase, the negative 8, so that's going to be negative 8 plus 1, that's going to give me negative 7 when added together, and give me negative 8 when multiplied. So I know that's right, so I'm going to come down here, I'm going to have 2x squared, and then I'm going to have minus 8x plus x minus 4. And now I'm going to have to use my grouping technique, so I'm going to have to come all the way back up here and erase all this, okay? So hopefully you have that written down. Okay, so I got a clear board here. So now I come back up here and I say I got to group these guys. So on this first one I have the 2x, which is on the outside. What can I take out of this down here? The 2x, I can take out a 2x. So I take out a 2x and I get x minus 4. And then I come here for this x minus 4. Well, they don't have anything in common, right? I can take out a 1. So I have plus 1 times x minus 4, and all of that equals 0. Okay, now I say, see, I did it right. I got x minus 4, and then I circle these guys, 2x plus 1. So I'm going to have 2x, which is this one, and then these guys times 2x plus 1 times my x minus 4 equals 0. Now, we would have been done in the other lesson, but we're not done here, because now we need to solve for 0. So let me now erase this guy. Okay, so this one's easy. Let's start with the 2x equals 0. So I do 2x equals 0, divide by 2, and x equals 0. So one answer is x equals 0. That's not too bad. Now let's do this one, 2x plus 1. So I do 2x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, minus 1, 2x equals negative 1, divided by 2, and I get x equals negative 1/2. Okay, there's there's the other answer. X equals negative 1/2. Then let's do this one last. X minus 4 equals 0. I add 4, and I get x equals 4. There are my 3 answers, all connected here with our black chain. Those are our 3 answers. X equals 4, x equals 0, and x equals negative 1/2. Okay, so that's how you do this lesson. Here's our homework, so I'm going to let you jump in. This is on page 487. This is 12.1. We're going to do 1 through 6 all, and then we're going to do 10 through 24 even. Okay, please let me know if you have any questions. Good luck in this last week. I'm missing you guys, and I pray that all is going well. Okay, Mr. H is over and out.